Okay, so we're live. We're going to give people a couple of minutes to join us. But in the meantime, if people want to just say where they're located, and then we can continue the conversation about generations because that's not something we had planned to talk about. And there'll be something for us to talk about before we get into the discussion. So I am joining from outside of DC, and my company is Rainwater Growth. I'll pass it over to Leslie.
Hello, hello. I'm joining from Lebanon, New Jersey, and the name of my company is Elemental Elevations.
Okay.
Hi, all. This is Michael Hales. I'm coming to you from Brandon, Mississippi, and my company is M Squared Leadership Consulting.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jill Tomzak Redmond. I'm coming to you from just north of Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. And my company is Results Coaching and Hypnotherapy.
Okay, and right before we went live, we were talking about different generations, and we were talking about how it matters of which way it measures, because some people say X is from this time to this, or some people say baby boomers. Because like even with my parents, I'm like, are you Xers too, or are you baby? What are you? So
Mhm.
trying to figure out where people are, and that's also, as Jill reminded us before we went live, that's going to inform some of our opinions or our way of looking at things besides the specialties. So I'll pass it over to Jill since she brought the question up before we got started.
What I'm finding is like as I said, I'm sort of on the cusp between, depending on how you want to measure it, whether I'm boomer or whether I'm X. And I do find myself not fully identifying with either one and identifying with both. That being said, that's going to affect how we lead and how we lead, and also whether or not we have a disconnect with different generations, because my generation, we're leaving the corporate workforce. We're
Mhm.
still there, and we're still going to be there for a little while, but the reins are being handed over. So
Absolutely.
if we are in a position of leadership, we are now leading those that have come through different generations, have different filters and different perspectives and needs from a workplace. So how do we lead someone who is not, doesn't have our own thinking? That's the question. And how do we as leaders take that into account? How do we as leaders become leaders for everyone and not just for our own people?
Mm.
Okay, Leslie, I'll let you jump in and talk about for you, and then we'll get started because it's now 3 o'clock.
Okay, so my answer to that is I'm wondering if that is going to make a little bit less of an impact than we think it is, only because we have so much access to things like social media and the differences of opinion. Um, Even if you don't agree with certain things, just the idea of being made aware of it, I wonder if that's going to kind of be the thing that helps close the gap that you're talking about.
Okay. And I'm going to stop there. So Michael and I will have to talk about it if we have time at the end. And we're
I
going to
hope we
go.
do. It's a really fascinating conversation. I
Mhm.
love
Yeah, I've actually gone to several different things. And then,
interacting.
like, not going to say it, I'm going to jump right in. So I want to welcome
Okay.
everyone to the second panel discussion of the Rainwater Growth Guest Speaker Series. And today I have joining me, I have Leslie and Mitchell, Michael Hales, and Jill Redmond. I'm going to say Redmond because
That's
these
fine. That's
upset me.
just
I always
fine.
tell people I took speech for several years for a reason, right? So today we're just going to have a conversation. We had some questions that we came up with beforehand, but we also will take questions from the audience. If anyone has the questions, you can put those in the chat. Just kind of keep it on topic so that we can stay on task and on schedule. So with that, I'm going to switch our view to the square so we can be talking heads. And I will start with our opening question. Please provide an overview of the service you provide and what inspired you to start it. So, what inspires you to get into leadership training?
Should I start? Is it okay?
Go right ahead, Leslie.
Alrighty then. So once again, my name is Leslie Ann Mitchell. I am the founder of Elemental Elevations, and I started my company a little bit by accident. For me, it began with the realization that I was running away from the idea and the fact of me being a leader. I think that I was always a leader, but I spent a lot of time trying really hard not to be one because I had had so many really negative experiences with people that were in leadership positions. And instead, I ran towards health because that was what fascinated me. That was like the human body, how it functions. And I became a health coach. I started doing um, helping people with digestive health. And then I had to do something, I had to do a presentation for the Project Management Institute. And I came up with my framework, the regulated leader, purely by accident. And when I came up with it, I sat down and I realized that this is basically the same thing. Digestive health, being a regulated leader, being a positive leader, it was all the same thing. And I was like, wow, okay. And I just kind of decided to run with it. Yeah, and that's why I do what I do. I have decided to focus mainly on women, basically because I am a woman myself, and because that makes it easier for me to speak to women from what it is as society has deemed womanhood is. We kind of all have that background, and yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna pick. Let's see. Choosing your. No, just kidding. I'll go with Michael. We'll do. For me, it's a semi. We'll go clockwise.
Okay, I'm happy to go. First, I'll explain my company name. It's M squared. The reason for that is I'm Michael and my wife and partner is Michelle. So we're M squared.
Mm.
We went with M squared instead of M and M because that kind of has a different kind of context. But anyway, that's the origin of the company name. How the actual company came about, I worked for 25 years in federal government. That's actually where O and I came into contact for the first time with the Social Security Administration. And I had a really good federal career. When I started in leadership there, they did a great job of starting me off on a good foot. They invested in me. They saw potential in me, and they, you know, were willing to nurture that and grow that and invest in me. And in that process of growth, I came across John Maxwell. You don't study leadership very long without running into John at some point. And so I did, and I started following him. His message really resonated with me, and I started pursuing, watching his videos and reading his books and all of that. And uh, I saw what he did, and I'm like, wow, that is really cool. He goes around helping people become better leaders and talking and training and inspiring people. Wouldn't it be really cool to do that? And I started dreaming about maybe one day when I get to the end of my federal career, I'll do that. I shared that dream with Michelle, and she's a little younger than I and still working her day job, which is why I'm here flying solo. But I did retire last year, and so we decided, let's do this thing. And along the way, we both got certified with Maxwell Leadership and have been growing a business for about a year now. It is super challenging. It is super fun, and I'm really loving it.
Okay, Jill.
I'm Jill Tomzak Redman, and um, I'm results coaching and hypnotherapy. And how I came to do what I do is I came to do what I do as a client. I was referred to, of all people, referred to this by my ex husband. I went through a process of was in the insurance industry, and that was, it's a very much a rules oriented business, and for good reason, for absolutely good reason. And one of the positions that I was in had some more creativity and problem solving in it. And of course, as an industry developed and as we are looking at financial regulations and things that came in, a lot of the creativity in the area that I was working in had to leave because things were becoming more regulated, where they didn't have that. So my problem solving ability wasn't being used. And eventually, when they restructured, I was let go. And then I again tried to stay in the industry for a long time, but realizing I had actually outgrown it. I was trying to fit myself into the mold of that industry, and I no longer could. So after staying in that industry or attempting to stay in it for a long time, when realizing I kept bouncing out of it, I finally called, of all people, my ex-husband and said, "Hey, I don't know. This is the third time I've been let go in the past while. It's got to be me." I said, "What do you suggest?" And through him, I was connected into the resources of neurolinguistic programming and some incredible master coaches and hypnotherapists. And so I began and came to it as a client when I basically blew up my life. And I blew through a 6-figure severance. What do you do now? So I needed to actually figure out who I was. For the longest time, I did exactly what everything I needed to do. I went to university, I got the degree, I got married, I had the kid, got the house, and yet it wasn't my life. It's not who I needed to be. It's not who I was, and I kept playing a role and wearing a mask instead of actually creating the life that actually fulfilled me. And the universe, being what it is, will say, "Okay, well, if we have to blow it up for you, we will." And through that, I went through the process myself. And once I went through and figured out who I really was, who I was without the mask, if I didn't have to play a role anymore, who was I going to be? And I actually got to step forward and take the leading role in my life, which I hadn't for 30 years. And that's when I came to as a client. I then started to go through trainings for my own personal development. And then after a while, I got hooked. I was like, you know what? I've seen what it does for me. I see what it does for other people. This is something I want to do. And I want to make sure that this, as if I had people that knew this information when I was in corporate, my corporate journey would have been a lot different. Knowing it's about communication, knowing it's about different styles, and knowing it's about how do you lead people that aren't necessarily wired the same way you are. And knowing that difference is out there, how it could have been different for me, but obviously this is what I need to do. This is my leadership, is that I need to bring people to this. And whether they're hitting their glass ceiling at home or at work, that's what I do. And that's how I started.
Okay, and I think like just hearing everyone talk, I was like, hey, we can have conversations offline because I have some interesting things to add to all of those, but I don't want to distract from our conversation right now. I want to start back with Jill, but I want to ask, so how do all three of your specialties, so how does mindset and resilience and new leadership, how does that all leadership development? It's like Michael said, he was given lots of resources when he went into management. So how do all these things come together, especially when someone is in the crucible of being a frontline employee, like when I think it was the word pedal hits the metal or whatever, when things
Mm-hmm.
come together, how do these three things, how do you see how these three things interact?
Yeah, I think it was Thomas Edison that said, whether you can, it might be wrong. So if somebody's out there can correct me on this, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. It starts with mindset. It starts with attitude. And in corporate, you call it attitude. Are you a team player? Like, what is your mindset going into it? And your mindset is something that you can control. You still have to do the actions. There's no getting around doing the work. However, starting with your mindset is, where are you? Resilience. It's all about, everybody can keep going when it's all going good, but what happens when you get knocked back? because life happens. Even the best laid plans, military, there's a great military expression: no battle plan survives first contact. So you have to be able to adapt. It's not about what you do when things go right, it's about what do you do when things go wrong or things are different. And I think that's where the resilience piece of it is. And if you can lead yourself, that's your first step into stepping into a leadership role that fits you. Because we all can be leaders. We don't necessarily have to be the head of the company. However, where are we leading? Whether are we leading at home? Are we leading in our families? Are we leading in corporate? Where are we leading and who are we leading? And that, I think, is huge as far as even just being sustainable without burnout. That's where I see it coming together.
And Leslie, it looks like you want to talk, so go ahead. Jump right in.
All righty then. So for me, I believe that everyone is a leader, right? I think it really comes down to two things. Are you only leading yourself or are you leading others? Because that is going to dictate, I think, what you are going to do, whether you're going to be dealing with people or just by yourself, just with yourself. Um, for someone that is leading people, or rather for both sides, right? You need, what the answer is, to learn how to regulate your own system first. If you cannot do that, you are going to, what I say, you're going to take all your stuff and you're going to vomit it on other people, right? You're going to, Bob is going to walk in, and forgive me, I always use the name Bob as whatever example it is. I don't know why, it's always what flies out of my mouth. But if you're working with Bob and you're having a bad day, and you think you can't regulate yourself, you're going to take that out on Bob, whether you realize you're doing it or not. So I think it always comes back to learning how to regulate yourself, learning how to center and how to ground yourself, figure out what triggers you in the workplace, what triggers you at home, what steps you need to take in order to make sure that you are keeping yourself to yourself, so that you can then observe what is going on around you and be able to lead people in a way that they need to be led in order for them to grow into the people, or rather the leaders that they need to become. Because being a leader means that you have to hold space for people other than yourself as well. And I'll leave it at that.
So, Michael.
I've got so many directions I want to go with this. First of all, I'll say poor Bob. I mean, come on, Leslie, give the guy a break. But Maxwell says that leadership is influence, and I think this ties in to what both ladies have said. Leadership, whether it's, and I think Leslie said, whether it's just yourself or whether you're actually leading other people, leadership is influence, and we all have influence over somebody, even if it's just ourselves. Leadership has to start with me. If I'm going to have any influence and help anybody in a positive way, I've got to start with me. And so I think attitude is so important. It's crucial. We all deal with our own. So let's just get real for a second. We're all human, right? We're all broken. We all have baggage that we're carrying with us. And we've got to address those things first. One of you said it already. If I come, I think it was Leslie with poor Bob. If I come in and I'm all bent out of shape and don't have my own stuff together, I don't know what I'm about, I'm going to take it out on Bob when I encounter him. I need to get to know myself, get to know what Michael's about, find out what my deficiencies are and where I'm broken, and try my best to mend those things so that I can be a whole person, bring my whole self to work, and be able to be effective in the workplace. Attitude is so important. And so I think being a leader is a difficult job. Maxwell also says that there's no two good consecutive days in a leader's life, I probably haven't been doing it right, because I think I've had maybe more consecutive good days than that, but it probably means I wasn't doing a very good job. But it 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 underscores the importance of resilience and being able to bounce back when things don't go your way, because they're not always going to. If you're in a leadership role and you hadn't figured that out already, just take a minute, because it's coming. And I think Jill referenced earlier, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. I don't know who that quote belongs to. Maybe it is Edison, or maybe it's somebody else. But we did a series not too long ago, Michelle and I, on self-limiting beliefs. And we see so many examples of where our own limiting beliefs have held us back in the past. And that's, I think, part of getting to know yourself and healing your own brokenness, is being able to, or being willing to sit down, invest the time and the effort in some self-reflection, getting to know yourself, digging deep into, your past and where you've been hurt before, and how that's maybe manifesting in your current things that you do and how you behave. And it will reveal, if you're anything like us, areas where you've held yourself back. And I think that's critically important as a leader. And finally, one last thing, I'm so glad that we're talking about frontline leaders. That is, leadership is such a big thing, and it's been hard for Michelle and me to narrow down what lane we want to focus in. But we're really passionate about developing um, leaders that are emerging or entering into or getting prepared to enter in that first leadership role. I said I had a good experience with Social Security. I had a very bad experience prior to that. And I was anointed into a leadership position, not prepared, and I crashed and burned. We can talk about that some other time. But I'm so glad that we're investing this time in, the idea of developing new leaders, frontline leaders.
Yeah, there's so many different things like. I also want to like hop, 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 hop. But this is the three of you. You the spotlight is going to be on the three of you. But this what Michael just said actually does um, tie into where I had already planned to kind of talk about my previous experience, and it builds upon what Michael had mentioned when talking about interior or internal dialogue, and then how that affects how you approach your job. So I had a different experience, right? I took nuts and bolts and said, I never want to be a manager at this company ever in my life, right? After I took that particular class, even though I was in a tech lead position. And like, I think all three of you mentioned that you have influence, even if you're not a S, like in Social Security, we had S leaders and then we had the other kind. So even if you don't have that S in your position title, you have the ability to lead and help people along their path. And so what happened to me when I was voluntold to be in in a supervisory position later was that I changed my view, right? Instead of thinking about it as being I'm going to be like those people in that 301 class, I thought about it as something I enjoy, customer service. And so once I changed it to the leadership being about customer service, and the people who are working with me, they're my customers, and my job is to make sure, I protect them from all this other fun that's happening up there, then that changed how I approached that job. And so instead of it being like a uh, you know, Eeyore moment, it was something different. So thinking about that, I'm gonna hand it back to Jill, and because you focus on so much on mindset. So how does that internal, thought process affect the way that you approach leadership?
And I'm going to link it back to Michael because it is a lot of our limiting beliefs will get us in the way. Um, what have we modeled? I work with a lot of neuro-linguistic programming, and it's all about modeling excellence. What what beliefs have we have? How are we running our lives? Are we running it based on information and decisions we made back when we were young, when we didn't have as many resources? Have we upgraded our internal apps? That's really the question. When I was 16, I made decisions and I made them based on the best resources that I had at the time. But in the intervening years, I might have learned a thing or two. So it's time to upgrade my apps. It's like, it's the phone, the computer. And when you're doing that, especially when you're looking at a leadership situation, having, a leader that's going to say, this is how we do it, my way or the highway, if that's the only way they've learned to lead, that's going to limit them. And so the mindset of being flexible, resilience, the willingness to be accountable, and the willingness to admit when that wasn't the best decision, it's the one I made one that I made, but how do we make it right? And that's really kind of the key question, and a key phrasing of how can I is really that's the phrase that opens up the neurology of possibility within ourselves. And when we're looking at a position from a leadership position, how can I do the best and be right by my team? How do I hold space for them? How can I be accountable to my team? Because I'm accountable as a leader to my team as well as myself. How can I? And that's when you start to put all of that together, you're going to am I going to be too proud to shed some of those limiting beliefs? Can I admit that I'm wrong? Can I admit that someone on my team has better ideas than I do? And where does that come into play? And do I have the skill sets that I need? And am I willing to go get them if I don't? So there's a lot of self-reflection when it comes into that. So when you're starting to look at resilience, and you have to be able to do that, because as a leader, you're out there in front. Like, how do you lead? Do you lead from the front? Do you lead from behind? Or do you leave? How do you do that? And how do you allow your team to develop? And your team, and I say this in a corporate sense, however, how do I do this? How do I let my daughter make those decisions for herself? How do I get her the skills if I'm looking at doing this socially? What am I passing on? So you're looking at legacy as well. As a leader, what's my legacy? If I leave, what's my team going to say? Are they going to be sad, or are they going to thank God she's gone? Because you never know. And that's, I think, really, as far as leadership goes, it's much more dynamic than I think that people think. When I grew up, you went through the system. As soon as the person who knew most got their leadership role, whether or not they actually were qualified for the leadership role or not, but looking at the skills of leadership themselves wasn't emphasized. And I love the way things are changing when we're really having this conversation of what does it look like? What does it look like now? What does it look like for this moment? And I think that's super important for all of us, and for as we continue this discussion, as workforce changes, as hybrid, we're on Zoom, we're virtual, we're in person, things move so fast. And how can you do that without getting run over? That's a big question.
All right, Leslie. We want to hear you.
I was on mute. I'm sorry, guys. So I think that a lot of what you said, Jill, is very much where we start. I do think that mindset is pretty much where it starts. And I actually wrote something on LinkedIn, I think it was like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, where I was having a conversation with someone, and I had never heard leadership be put in this. I've never heard a leader speak about leadership in this way. And this gentleman that I was talking to said that he had been training. He walks into a room, and the people that he trains are the ones doing whatever it is. He doesn't do anything. And to me, what I got from that is that you have to relinquish a very large amount of control in order for you to get to a space where you can walk into a room with people that you yourself have trained and be okay with sitting back and letting them do what they have learned to do. And that mindset is, I think, what I think going forward, we're going to need to see a lot more of that kind of mindset. And I don't think that I have met very many people who would think about leadership in that aspect. They tend to look at it as, well, I'm the leader. You're going to do what I want you to do. And if you don't do what I want you to do, well, then there's going to be consequences and repercussions. I've literally had somebody tell me that when my grandmother died, like years and years ago. But that way of leading is something that is coming to an end. And I'm for my part, I'm really glad that it is. But it's also going to give us, I think, a really, really bright future.
Okay, Michael.
So I gotta first ask, Leslie, are you old enough to know where that consequences and repercussions comes from? That was for Beverly Hills Cop way back in the 80s.
Really?
Eddie Murphy said that line in that movie. That's hilarious.
Oh, that's so funny.
So yeah, there's going to be consequences and repercussions. But my brain in this conversation goes to leadership versus management, and they're really very similar. Okay, and oftentimes we, in typical everyday usage, will conflate the two, and it brings to mind that here's the difference. Management is more about tasks. Leadership is more about people. And you have to manage both, okay? We have to manage tasks. Somebody's got to get the work done. But leadership is about people. It's always about people. And this goes back to where you kind of started this part of the conversation. When you were able to make that switch in your brain of this is about the people. I forget exactly how you said it, but you flipped a switch and that resonated for you. It always will. If you're a leader, it's got to be about the people. The people come first. You equip the people so that they can do the work. You empower the people, which goes to what Leslie was talking about. That's what real leaders do. And I wanted to say that we evaluate, it was Leslie or Jill, I forget which one, that talked about suitability for a leadership role. And I got to thinking about that just in the moment here. And I think so many times what happens is, I may have mentioned this earlier. Usually what happens when somebody gets promoted into a leadership role is they become the star of the team. They are the best. They are the highest producer. They're the best performer on the team. And so when it comes time to select a leader for the team, we'll tap that person. Well, maybe they're the best suited for that role, and maybe they're not. Maybe their personality is they're a manager of tasks. And what you really need in the leadership role is a leader of people. And maybe they could develop that, and hopefully everybody lives happily ever after and it works out. But I'm thinking of one particular guy that I used to work with. He was never going to get promoted, y'all, because he just wasn't good enough at the job of being a technician to ever get promoted. But y'all, I guarantee you, if you were ever in a foxhole, this is the guy you would want to have your back. He cared so much. He was for people. He would support you. He was dedicated. He was all the things that you would look for in a leader, and he never got a chance because he wasn't a good enough technician. Now that illustrates a couple of things, I think. Number one, maybe we should reevaluate how we select a leader sometimes. And number two, it's like we need to make sure that we've got people operating in their strength zones. And I think that's important. I'll hush here in a minute, but something else I jotted down is the importance of dealing with ego in leadership. If you can't get over your own ego, you're never going to be effective as a leader, because you're going to naturally hold people back. You're going to hold them down. You're going to take that identity of, I'm the one who gets stuff done around here. You all just have to do what I say, and you'll fail to empower people, and you won't grow them, and you won't let them flourish and reach their potential. So we've got to deal with ego, and I think curiosity is one of the most important ways we do that. Just get curious. It helps solve so many problems if, instead of assuming that we know, we'll just get curious and start asking some questions.
I'm going to just quickly hop onto that, Michael. Two things. One of the things, because I come at it from a coaching perspective, that I will directly ask clients, well, do you want to be effective or do you want to be right? That's the question. Because a good leader is going to wants to be effective. And if that means, taking a step back and letting somebody else lead in the moment, you drive the bus for this until we get across the bridge, because you know the best way. And letting the ego aside on that is huge. And I think having the self-awareness to be able to step back and let go of the ego of my way or the highway. And if you don't have that flexibility, then you may not be that may be something you need to develop. I'm not going to say that you're not leadership material. That's a gap. And there's ways of filling that gap. So even if you are the best technician, you may not be the best suited for leadership of a team. However, you are still leading yourself. And that reward, knowing that, if you have people like that on your team or in your life that maybe are not going to get promoted because they may not be recognized, because they may not be in the tech position, or they're really, really good techs, but they can't go anywhere because the next thing is management, and that's not where they shine. They still need to be rewarded. So as leaders in your life or at home, how do you still reward someone to make sure that they have that light shown on them? Because their technician piece, that's really important, because stuff still has to get done. And I know we're talking about this in corporate, but this also goes, how do we, even for ourselves, how do we do that? How do we lead our houses? What role do we play, and where do I step back and let my partner shine? Where are his skills, even in the household? So how we conduct ourselves, because how we do anything is how we do everything. If we're going to do it corporately, we can do it at home. And if we can do this at home, we can do it corporately. And I think knowing who we are and our own skill set and where our gaps are, and have the curiosity, which is a hugely powerful state, by the way, an emotional state. It's great. That's going to have the curiosity to how to fill that gap.
Anyone? I mean, you still could jump in if you want to. I actually had, after thinking about that, I don't want to get too far off of because we still have like maybe 4 questions and we have 20 minutes. But thinking about what you just said, mentioning, like, I'm glad that you brought it up, because you kind of touched on it, Jill, about how and it also touches on something that Leslie said earlier about how before, if you wanted a promotion, that was the only route that you could go, because it was like, if you needed more money, you got 10 kids, you need to get more money. And so maybe you go into that manager role, even though that's not even where you want to be, but you need to get that next promotion or that next job. So thinking about how Leslie mentioned earlier, how things have changed, and do you think that this is going to be better for leaders going forward, that people, you won't have so many people who don't want to be in the, who are just taking the job for the money. I don't know a better way to say that, but you won't have as many people going, since things are changing now. You won't have as many people funneled into these leadership roles who would just rather be ICs. You will actually have people who are more directed to it, or looking at that skill set, like Michael said, that if you have someone who, when you take your whatever assessments and they score highly in these particular traits that map well with leadership, and we pick those people versus the technical experts, how do you think that that shift, or that shift as we were heading, because now we have a whole different thing that got thrown in there the past couple of years, they're just changing things just a little bit, but how do you think that's going to change uh, how leadership works in the corporate, or even in the small business environment? Because as we share these things, because a lot of times people who start businesses, they start off as solopreneurs, but then they have to start growing their teams, and maybe they have never been in management before, and so they haven't gotten those hard knocks yet that you get as a first line, as a first line, and so everything is new. They're managing a growing business. So how does this change in the way that we do things affect leadership overall? And that's a like 30-minute question, but take a minute each and address it.
Leslie, would you like to go first? Or I don't mind.
Um, sure, I'll go. So I think that what's going to happen in the future is that we're going to have a lot more people that I think it's inevitable that we have people that are going to have to learn how to lead themselves, right? And I don't think that there's any way around that, because we're coming off of a space where, and I don't really like to bring it up sometimes, but the fact that COVID happened, right? It really did a number on I don't want to say everybody, but pretty much everybody. And because it did, I think that a lot of people would think that it was a negative thing, but I think what it did is it has started a shift where people have to be more internal. There's no way around it. You cannot be in a space anymore. And if you are, I think you won't be effective going forward, right? You're not going to be able to get things done. And the things that you're going to get done, I believe, are going to start to become a bit subpar. And it's not to be negative, it's to say that being able to be within yourself, being able to be comfortable within yourself so that you can be, what's the right word? So that you can be allowing of the people around you. I don't think that there's any way that that's not going to happen going forward. So the best thing you can do is for you to at least begin that process, at least begin going inward, so that when things happen, whatever it is that happens, you have a certain level of sense of self so that you're not lost. Because I think a lot of us are in this space because of what happened 5 years ago, where we're a little lost. And that's okay. That means that you know where you are and you can grow from there. And I think it's just growth. And I think we can't be afraid of it, which means that we can't be afraid of change. I think I'll start there.
Michael?
That's a fascinating take on that, Leslie. I've got to put some thought into that. I think you make a good point. And maybe it comes down to becoming more connected with purpose, with my purpose. You really provoked my thoughts there. I guess what I would say in getting back to O's original question is I think it's going to be better going forward for people who are technical experts and want to pursue career advancement as a technical expert rather than in a leadership role, because they're very different skill sets. Now, if you look at it in a Venn diagram, there is some overlap, but then the the things that got you here as a great technical expert are not the same things that are going to get you there as a successful, high performing leader. You're going to have to expand and learn some new skill sets. That said, I do think organizations are probably more aware now than they used to be that maybe we should have some kind of like parallel career tracks for people who are better suited to advance along a technical path versus those who are better suited to advance along a leadership path where they are responsible for other people. Because as I said before, leadership has to be about people. It's always about the people. And if it's not about the people, you're not doing it right. You can be a manager without it being about the people. You can't be an effective leader without it being about the people. So I think we've got some hope because organizations are becoming more aware of all of this, as I said. But I will caution that I think it's not something that's going to happen quickly. Somebody's already referenced that change is hard. Change is difficult. Even good, positive change, we humans have a hard time dealing with it. We don't want to accept it. We get comfortable even in our ruts. We get comfortable in the things that are even not good for us, but this is the way I've always known it and done it. And so it's going to take some doing to break out of those things, even to move towards something that's going to be better for us. So I think we've got a long way to go, but I do see some hope of, things changing for the better there.
Just to, Michael and Leslie, you've made some really, really good points. It's easier to change. It's easier to change directions when things are moving. It's really hard. You're driving your car. It's hard to turn the wheels when the car's at a standstill. So since things are changing and things are moving, this is the best time. This is the best time. Right now is the best time to make changes, to see where we're going, to get movement. You're right, and we can be comfortable in a rut, and we can be comfortable. From my perspective, a lot of my clients that come to me, because the pain, I'm going to use the word pain, has gotten too big. It's gotten too uncomfortable. However, a lot of people are really comfortable in being uncomfortable. So until it gets big enough, they're not willing to make that change. However, the easiest time when things are starting to move, when switching, when sort of things are being redrawn, is the best time to make a change and to figure out. And the universe works through energy, works through prayer, works through action. It's always action. It's a universal law. It is common to so many societies and so many belief systems that sitting there and waiting is not enough. If we want to actually make any impact in the world, we have to actually take action. So that way it can work through us. And that includes leadership and deciding how we want to lead. At what level do we want to lead? Maybe we just want to lead ourselves. Maybe we want to lead a team. Where are our strong suits? And again, going back to what Leslie says, it's really knowing that where you are and who you are. What role are you playing? Are you wearing masks just to make a living? And sometimes, bottom line is bills got to get paid. We all, that's where we're at. That's the way society works. It's important. However, how do we continue to strive to be our best? And whether we're leading anybody else there. And I think those simple principles go all the way through leadership. Anybody that's with me, that's coming through me, anyone in our lives that we are influencing, how are we becoming a leader in those cases, even if it's an indirect leader? How are we working through that? And whether we're doing that for ourselves or we're doing it for a team of 50. How are we working in action is one thing that'll allow us to do that. I love these pieces together because I love the fact that it highlights that it's not just one thing, that there are so many facets of it, and to be aware of it now. It gives me hope for the workforce, the generations that come behind us. Everybody says, oh, this generation, they don't want to work. No, it's just because they're not going to do it. It's not the same. I mean, I know young people that are. I say that like a boomer. Wow. Um, they got 4 or 5 things going on. They got businesses. They've got side gigs because they are taking action. It's simply different, and different isn't necessarily bad. But they ask the questions: How can I? And they come up with these answers. And I think that's the big question we need to ask ourselves and do the work.
If I can add one thing onto that, this is lenses on leadership. So we're talking leadership here. And another Maxwellism is that leaders have a bias toward action. And it speaks to what Jill was talking about. We're going to get a lot more done if we take action, try something, make a mess, fail. At least you'll figure out something that didn't work. So now you can try something that maybe will. I think that's such an important, and it's my personality. I'm a thinker. I want to figure it all out down to the nth degree. And so I know what's coming. I know what's going to happen. I need more data. I want to sleep on it overnight. And I've had to learn to let that go. I've had to get over myself a lot and take some action, start the car rolling, and I'll figure out how to steer it much better in that kind of posture than if I just sit here, and wait forever.
Okay, so our time has flew by, so I'm going to go back to our generation question because before we run out of time, and let Michael continue and talk about uh, what generation he's in and how that affects, how he thinks that affects leadership and all the other things that we are talking about before. Even though we've talked about so much since then, but I want to give you a chance to to jump in there.
Well, Jill almost brought us back around to it naturally in the course of her last answer, talking about how the different generations, one is not inferior to the other. And even though a lot of us older generations, I'm on the cusp between, I'm not a boomer, okay, but I am on the cusp there
Okay, Boomer. No.
of early. I knew we wouldn't finish this call without that getting said, but I'm an early Gen X, okay, and so I have this because of the way I was imprinted with the experiences that happened to me, and that all of those of my generation shared. I grew up with a certain set of beliefs and things that I grew to espouse and accept as normal, and all of those things. And just because the generations that came behind me had very different experiences growing up, that doesn't mean theirs that mine are right and theirs were wrong, and mine were normal and theirs are somehow abnormal. It is what it is. And I know that's cliche and I kind of hate to say it, but it's never been more true than in this context. We're all imprinted by the experiences that happened and that shaped us as we were coming up. And your first 20 years of our lives are so impactful in making, in kind of establishing who we're going to be and how we're going to view the world. And you take a 20-year span of time from 40 years ago or 50 years ago versus now, it's very different. And so it shouldn't be surprising that the different generations view things in a very different way. I think the problem, and it goes back to what we were saying before about curiosity, is when we get in our brain that my way is the right way and everybody else is somehow abnormal if they don't see things and appreciate and view the world the way that I do. If we can get curious about what is it that has shaped you and what has made you the person that you are, that's where we're going to be so much more effective. And it goes to something that somebody said earlier again, that I think it was Jill. Our generation is moving out of the workforce now. And so the way we've always done it is going to be meaningless in a very few more years. And we've got to do this the right way to make this transition to the next generation of leaders who are going to see things a little differently, who are going to do things a little differently. We need to make that an effective transition so that they'll be able to lead effectively when they get ready to take the reins, which is coming very soon.
Yeah, for me to jump in about my, again, I'm a baby X, right? But most of all my friends are baby boomers. And I actually had friends, they're no longer with us, but I actually had friends that were actually in the silent generation before. And so that influences how I think about things. But at the same time, my little sister and all my cousins, they're millennials. So I have both of those points of views. Plus, I have my own, right, of being in Gen X. And so one thing that helped me, especially because I remember when I was a teenager, we said, my sister who's a millennial, me and my friends who were contemporaries, they were like, they different. Even when we were 20s, we was like, no, some different. Like we could catch on to that. But coming into the workforce, seeing that they don't have the same guarantees. It used to be that you worked hard for your company and then they rewarded you and get now they're like, oh, you've been here for 6 months. We need to make an extra $20, you're gonna get laid off, right? And so that changes, and that's why people have five, they have, all their side gigs and things like that. So thinking about that and then taking things from other people's perspective and saying, oh, like Michael said, let's have that curiosity. I think that's really interesting. I like curiosity. That's like I ask a lot of questions. So, of course I love talking about curiosity. Maybe we should have a panel on curiosity. Panel 7. All right, so we only have 3.5 minutes. So that gives everyone about 1 minute, and we can go a little bit over probably. But if people could remember only one thing about you from today's discussion, what would it be? And I will start with Michael.
Okay, Boomer had trouble getting unmuted there. One thing about me, I think I would want you to really understand that leadership is about people. It's about connecting with the people. As a leader, you have to get things done. Okay. If you don't, you're not going to be a leader in that organization for very long because they're going to get rid of you. But your first and primary responsibility is to take care of the people that are in your charge. There's a quote on that, and I don't remember who it was that said it, and I wouldn't get it exactly right if I tried. But that's one thing I would want you to take away is it's about the people. It's always about the people. If you're in a leadership role, take care of your people. They'll take care of the mission.
Leslie.
So I will say if there's one thing you can take away from this, it is understand that leadership is about creating a container for other people, including yourself, but creating a yeah, I'm getting tongue tied, but creating a container that will allow for growth. I think that is the most important thing that we need to know going forward. It doesn't really matter what your role is, as long as you are creating a container for healthy growth, I would say. And I have to tap the healthy part on top of that because I think we have all had really bad leadership experiences at some point. Everyone has had it. And so the goal is to make sure that the container you're creating for leadership is going to give people a healthy space that allows them to become who and whatever it is that they need to become in the role that you are leading them in.
And Jill.
The one thing I'd like to let people remember is when you step into a leadership role, whether you think you're ready or you're not, if it presents to you, it's time for you to step into that role and to figure it out and get the resources, recognize your gaps, recognize your team can be your greatest strength. And if you have a gap, fill it, get the skills, go get the resources that you need, and understand it's better to be effective than it is to be right. And I think knowing that and being able to leave ego off to the side, a little bit of ego is always good. However, don't let it get in your way. You want to be effective. And if you are effective, in the end, you'll have been right.
All right. And so I guess I'm gonna use my applause sound there. Up. We're right at the hour. We did it in time. I want to first invite everyone to, before we stop the recording, to invite everyone to our next panel discussion, which is going to come up in next month on August the 18th. And it's going to be talking about alternative paths to success. So this is more targeted to small business owners, but it's talking about different things that business owners don't realize and different resources they don't realize that are out there for funding, for insurance, and just to support their businesses. So uh, is available to register on the same Luma page where you found this particular one. And so with that, I will stop the recording. Thank you, you guys.